my association with Island Farm Camp goes back to when I was 6 years of age, when my father used to bring me down here to look at the camp, and also an uncle of ours lived in the married service quarters, which were just adjacent to the camp. He was a keen photographer, and there is a photograph of me with my sister stood in front of the painting, which you'll see later on, at 6 years of age, with my coat on, staring at the painting. I'm 48 this year, so it's been a long association with the camp. When I was a child, every summer holiday, I used to come down here on our bikes, possibly try and relive war games and play around here, knowing the history of the camp as well, and how important it was. It was a brilliant playground when we were youngsters. The whole camp 40 years ago was abandoned, very empty, a lot of overgrown trees everywhere. There wasn't a pane of glass in any of the buildings. It was derelict. Local farmers used to keep their horses in here, and it was just never used. But what always surprised me for all that time is that none of the paintings that were on the walls done by the prisoners were ever defaced. They were all pristine. We've got bits and pieces that we're turning up over the years when we're doing our little work around here. Camp coffee bottles, we've got hundreds of those, Bovril jars, bits of broken crockery. We've even found a toothpaste tube here from when it was prisoner of war camp. And there's generally bits and pieces. But what has been very apparent since we started this journey all those years ago is the amount of bits and pieces that people have collected over the last 40 years also, and they're now bringing them back, whether it be clay balls, more glass jars, bottles, all sorts. And it's brilliant. Even chunks of wall have been returned to us with German graffiti on them that have been somebody's garage for 25 years, but they're now here for everybody to see. March 1945, 70 German POWs escaped from Island Farm, from this very building, down the far end of the building, and in order to hide the clay that they were digging out of the tunnels, they constructed a false wall halfway down the building. And the proof of the pudding was in the eating. When the guards walked past the following morning, they didn't even notice that a door had been removed overnight and had been bricked up. A small hole was made in the wall from the ablutions end, where these clay balls were condensed down and they were posted through. And about 1987, 88, if I remember rightly, the wall in the ablutions box finally collapsed under the weight of all this wet clay and spewed out all over the floor. It's actually there to this day now, all that clay. We can't access that building because there's a preservation order for the bats at that end. But yeah, so we've got a selection of clay balls there with the fingerprints and the handprints of the German POWs who tunnelled it 75 years ago.
I'm here running the NAFE, which is a World War II NAFE, and I make all the cakes. I bring them all the way over from England, bring them over here, sell them all to the visitors and feed the reenactors, and raise a lot of money. And that's how we raise our bit of funds and do our bit.
Keep smiling through, just like you always do.
At the same time the ordnance factory was being built, 3 sites in Bridgend were earmarked for hostels for the female workers who were going to be working here. But unfortunately they were never used for that purpose. Families still needed to be looked after, and the women who were working in the factories preferred to travel down here. So they lay empty for quite some time. So the camp actually went through a whole series of different uses. It was ready for the American forces that actually came to UK prior to D-Day. The Americans were in Bridgend for some time, and Margam and all the local areas. Then it became a prisoner of war camp after the invasion, because there was a lot of places in the UK that were rushed for prisoners of war, including this one. And by all accounts, the Italians were still putting up barbed wire when the first Germans arrived here in November 44. So after peace in 45, the camp was redesignated. It was originally Camp 198, officer camp. It became Special Camp number 11. At that time, for about 2.5 years, there were up to 180 high-ranking German officers here, field marshals, generals, admirals, and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt spent some time in Bridgend. He was actually quite popular with the locals because things were different after the war. He was allowed out to take his walks. He could be seen with his terrier walking around Bridgend with a cane, always a guard with him, but not escorting him. The guard was there to protect him, not to protect the public from him, obviously. So Von Rundstedt spent some time here. He spent some time in Bridgend General Hospital, as was. He was an elderly man at that time, obviously. And he travelled back and forth to Nuremberg twice from Bridgend, and there are some famous photographs of him actually arriving from the back of a truck from the Bridgend railway station into Bridgend. But we've got so many fond stories of youngsters. They would meet on the way to school because there's a school just over the road. He'd be out taking his morning walk. You see the children going to school. He would give them a little click of his heels and a bow. Sometimes he'd have sweets in his pocket for them. And he was fondly remembered. He was an aristocrat at the end of the day. He was a Prussian military officer. So yeah, that's the claim to fame of Bridgend as well. Today, all that's left of the site of the former prisoner of war camp is the one hut, Hut 9 as it's become known, which was the escape hut. The rest of the camp was pulled down in 1988. There were projects afoot for doing things with the land. They never come to any fruition. But fortunately for us, the council and Cadw at the time were able to put a preservation order on the building. It's a Grade 2 listed building. And Cadw would supply some money to renovate this one hut as much as they could. Unfortunately, there was no money to look after it after that. And it started to revert back to as the rest of the camp looked 40 odd years ago. There were trees growing through the windows, the grass was high out there, and it was being vandalised. So they decided to seal the building down. They put steel shutters everywhere. They put a new roof on, which was great. And it was abandoned again. Bats moved in then, and they actually occupy 3/4 of the building. We can't touch those, obviously. We look after them and the bats look after us, because I'm pretty sure that if they bats weren't here, this building might have gone a long time ago. So we were asked many years ago as reenactors to come along here and sort of add a bit of sort of fun to the place, to be honest with you, make it a bit more interesting. Because at the time, all they were doing was opening the door and showing people around an empty building with a torch, and it wasn't very exciting. So we were approached then by some ladies on the council who actually look after Hut 9, who are responsible for Hut 9, and asked us if we'd want to form part of a preservation group. As I said earlier on, I was 6 years of age when I used to come down here, and I played in here, and I'm passionate about Bridgend's wartime history. So there was a core group that were formed. Now our goal is preservation and education. It's still surprising the amount of people that we get here week in, week out, who tell us that they had no idea this place existed, no ideas of Bridgend's wartime history. So there comes the education part. What we've also done is we've kitted out the rooms as close as possible to what we think it looked like as a prisoner of war camp. Records and photographs are very few and far between. But like any good historians or archaeologists, you get the pieces that are there and you build the rest around it. You still got to assume rather a lot. We looked at photographs and records from other prisoner of war camps in the UK. And we have tried to speak to people who are actually stationed here, either as British Guards or actually interned as German POWs. We do twice a year is we open up the hut and we bring our reenacted friends down and we bring the building back to life again. Back to what it was originally used for, with bunk beds, with people in them, people eating, drinking, as it was, because an empty building is very, very cold. So on these weekends, we get the best part of 600 people coming through us. We're fully booked for months in advance. We give them a short sort of introduction and the history of Island Farm, Bridgend, and then we bring them down to the camp and try and send them back to the past for a couple of hours. I think since the death of my father, I think it means so much more to me because he was passionate about this place as well. When I was younger, it was a chance of escaping from school, homework, all the other things, and going back to something that was so important for Bridgend. And between that place and my father, that's where my passion for history has come from over the years. I love the fact that my father used to wax lyrical about this place whenever he used to tell me stories about the escape, about the men that were here. And I think it's important that we've got such an important building or a piece left that we can continue telling those stories for future generations. And that's what I love about it as well, because we get a good cross-section of people here, from youngsters to elderly people who remember this place when it was a POW camp, and we all share those stories, and it's absolutely marvellous.